is here. Can you believe it? Football season again. Yes, here we go. The first spring practice under the new Alex Golesh regime. I cannot wait to see how it all plays out. We're going to break it all down here on this edition of Talkin' Tumors. I am Carson Horn. We have a lot to get into. There are so many topics to get into, so many questions that I have. We're going to have plenty of time over the next coming months to really dive in and discuss this Auburn football team, this roster, Alex Golesh, this staff. So much to talk about. We haven't spent a ton of time on Auburn football over the last couple of months because we've been talking mostly about Auburn basketball, but I have plenty that I want to talk about and discuss that I think many of you are going to be interested in hearing and discussing as well, and so I hope you'll enjoy these episodes. Just a few housekeeping items before we really get into it. If you are looking for basketball content, I decided to split that up into a separate episode, so this is just going to be Auburn football, so if you're looking for the basketball content, make sure to check out that other episode on YouTube and your podcast feeds. That'll be coming if it's not already out there by the time you're watching or listening to this episode, but just wanted to make you aware of that before we get going. But let's get into it now. Auburn starts spring practice this upcoming Tuesday. The 8A game will be on April 16th, I believe. So you're going to have about a month of spring practice. Auburn students return from spring break this week, so they'll get back to classes. And it worked out well for Auburn to start spring practice after spring break. There's been years where Auburn's done a week, then given a week off for spring break, and then gone back and had a practice. I don't love that, so I like that Auburn was able to identify a schedule that worked well with the academic calendar. So Auburn's going to start spring practice this week, and we haven't discussed Auburn football enough, honestly, and that's my fault because we've been so inundated with basketball, and that's what we've spent a lot of time on. There's a lot of things, a lot of questions that I have, and I'm excited to see this football team for the first time take the field. Just a couple of notes. If you aren't aware, of course, Auburn added a lot of guys in the portal, over 40 plus new players. And remember, this is pretty much your team. So in years past, you had the spring transfer portal window after spring practice. Well, by rule, that's no longer allowed. There is no portal window. So your team is set for spring practice. There shouldn't be any more changes to your roster, minus maybe a couple of guys. Now, there's some belief that some people may try to work the system. I'm sure that will happen. But for the most part, your roster is set. So it is what it is at this point. If you've got a bad roster, you've got a bad roster, and you're just out of luck. So it can be a good and a bad thing. I think overall this is good for the sport. And that your roster is mostly set, but I did want to make that note. So if we're talking about issues with the roster or areas where we think Auburn needs to get better and add a player or two, they may be out of luck in doing that. So, what are we watching for in spring practice? Let's start with that. I'm sure you have many things that you're watching for. I'm going to give you a few things that I'm watching for and looking forward to seeing this spring. Quite frankly, it's everything, and I think that's probably for most people, but that wouldn't make a very good show, so I'm going to tighten it down to a couple of things. But because it is a new head coach in Alex Golesh, I really am interested in seeing the whole process and seeing everything that takes place with this program. But for a football junkie and football nerd like me, the structure of practice is one big thing I'm really interested to see. How does this compare to how Hugh Freeze ran his practice? How does it compare to other coaches in the country? I believe Auburn's doing morning time practices. I'd have to confirm that. I'm not 100% sure on that. I think that's what they're going to do. The morning time practice is backed by science. It's a newer strategy that you're seeing for a lot of programs across the country now. So Auburn, I believe, is going to do that under Alex Golesh, but again, I have to confirm that. But beyond that, what's the vibe like at practice? What's the energy like? What's the intensity? Things like, are you playing music at practice? What are the coaches doing? Are they acting any differently than maybe some of the previous staffs? Those are the kind of things I'm looking for, just to see what's Alex Golesh's style as a head coach in the practice setting. We have a little bit of a view of how it is in the game setting from watching him at USF, but how does he look in the practice setting? And I'm also, I don't know how much media viewing that the Auburn media will have. A lot of great guys on the Auburn beat. I don't know how much of an open window of practice they will get. Hugh Freeze, to his credit, did give the Auburn media a pretty good viewing window. I don't know what the case will be with Alex Golesh, so we may not be able to see a ton of practice or get to see much content from practices, but hopefully we will. Number two, I'm interested in how is this team meshing. As I mentioned already, you have 40-plus new players. I think you got over 30 transfers. You add in the freshmen, you may be upwards of 50 new guys when you include everything from scholarship guys to walk-ons, transfers, high school recruits. How does this team mesh? How does this team come together? They've been doing off-season workouts since January, so they've already had an opportunity to start making bonds. But this is really where it happens. When you finally put those pads on and you start hitting each other, what type of bond, what type of chemistry is this team going to have on and off the field? Start to be able to develop that in spring. It doesn't need to be perfect in spring. Again, you still have a long way to go until we get to August and in Auburn's first game in September. But this is still a big deal and something to watch for that I'll be looking forward to seeing this spring. And then thirdly, who stands out as leaders on this team? I think Byron Brown is going to be the obvious one, and you need him to be the leader. He's your star quarterback, transferred over from USF. If you didn't know, I think many of you did. He is going to be Auburn's quarterback. He's the alpha dog. You already see Auburn social media keeping him in a lot of content they've been posting on Twitter and on Instagram. I think he is going to be one of the big leaders. But beyond him, Auburn does have some key guys that did return. When you think about someone like Xavier Atkins at linebacker, Elijah Melendez, DeMarcus Riddick on the defensive side, you think Dallas Walker. So there are guys, Jeremiah Cobb on the offensive side. There are guys that did return that you're going to also expect to be leaders for this Auburn team, along with other transfers that came in from USF or from other places as well that have that potential. When it's a completely new team, when you've got a completely new head coach, it really doesn't matter who steps up as a leader because everyone essentially is new. You're starting fresh. It's not the same coaches for the most part. Of course, Hugh Freeze is gone. So I don't think it's that big of a deal where the leadership comes from as long as there are leaders. Again, the best teams, you hear coaches say it. You heard Alex Golesh say it. The best coaches are player-driven, player-led. Will Auburn have that this season? We'll see. That is one area that Auburn has lacked in a major way over the last several years. There's not to say there haven't been some good leaders over Auburn's really bad stretch over the last 5 years, but overall, Auburn has lacked really strong leadership. So we'll see if we get that from this team this year. Beyond that, let's look at position groups and what we are watching for, what I'm watching for in position group battles. Now, I'm going to go kind of surface level on today's episode. As we continue on throughout the spring and into the summer, I'll go a little bit more deeper into each position room, kind of diagnosing that, looking at the room, figuring out how we want to grade it, all that. So this is just going to be more of a surface level view. But again, these are some of the position groups I'll be watching through spring practice to see how these position battles play out, starting with the offensive line. We can talk about Byron Brown in the quarterback position all that we want, but Auburn's got to be better along the offensive line if this team wants to reach its ceiling this year. You have 10 guys, when I look at this roster, that I legitimately believe have a shot to start this year. That might be a good thing, that might be a bad thing. We'll find out, but I really believe when you look at this roster, you've got 10 guys that have a legit shot to start. You have 8 transfer offensive linemen. But Auburn could potentially start 5 transfer offensive linemen this year. I don't know for sure that'll be the case, but it is a possibility. I don't think Auburn knows who's going to start for them. I don't think the staff knows who's going to start for them along the offensive line yet. You have a pretty good feeling about a couple of guys when you think about Joseph Simmons, who Auburn brought in as a transfer from James Madison, Stanton Ramil, that Auburn brought in as a transfer from Michigan State, Cole Best from USF. Those 3 guys are more than likely going to start, but they're going to have to earn it. There's a couple of guys like Ty Buster, who's coming back, one of the few returnees from Auburn's offensive line that's going to have a chance to compete for a starting job, and multiple other transfers and younger guys as well. So really, really looking forward to watching this offensive line compete and battle this spring. The competition will go on into the fall. I don't think it's going to be resolved this spring. If you're reading practice reports from spring practice, I would not freak out about any type of offensive line rotation or depth chart at this point. I fully expect it to change and to evolve plenty over the coming months. So if you look at the first rotation along the offensive line, for example, in the first spring practice, and you're looking at it and saying, well, maybe Joseph Simmons isn't in there, Stanton Ramil, did we really whiff on our evaluations? I just say be patient. Be patient and see how this rotation plays out. And we'll see where it gets in the fall. Second up, running back room. Jeremiah Cobb is returning. Omar Mabson is returning. Alvin Henderson is returning. But Auburn added a lot of talent in this running back room. Alex Golesh, that was one room that he really thought, hey, this has got to get better. When Auburn's at its best, Auburn runs the ball at a really high level and has some really, really good running backs. Auburn's had some good running backs still even over these past couple years. But last year's running back room, if we're being honest, was not up to the Auburn standard. Not a knock on anybody in that running back room. Damari Alston, Jeremiah Cobb were solid backs, and Jeremiah Cobb still is a really solid back. But the overall depth in that room and talent in that room was not where it needs to be. Alex Golesh understood that, and he brought in a couple of really high-level transfers, including Bryson Washington, transfer running back from Baylor. He and Jeremiah Cobb are probably going to be your 1A, 1B this year. I think it'll be situational on who gets more carries game in and game out. I think they'll both carry a heavy load. But then you add Nakai Davenport, who played an important role for USF last season in there. He adds more depth. Tay Meadows, really solid back for Troy. He transferred to Auburn. He's going to try to work his way into that rotation. And then, as I mentioned, Omar Mabson and Alvin Henderson return. They're going to be battling out to try to stay in that depth chart and get carries. You're not going to have 6 running backs that get carries. You're just not. I do think you could have 3 to 4. So can Omar Mabson and Alvin Henderson break that rotation and get in there? That's one thing I'll be looking forward to, along with seeing how Auburn balances Jeremiah Cobb and Bryson Washington this spring. Another position room that Auburn really revamped was the tight end room. Tight end room for Auburn was atrocious last season. Everyone that watched Auburn knew that. Really, really bad tight end room. And this is an area that Alex Golesh is prideful in because he was a tight ends coach as a position coach before he became an offense coordinator and head coach. So he wasn't going to let the tight end room be as bad as it was last season. So Auburn brought in a ton of guys here. The only tight end Auburn returned is Ryan Gia. He is back, was a true freshman last year. Played a good bit down the stretch because of some injuries. More of a blocking tight end, but he'll have a chance to continue to develop his receiving skills as well this spring. But then just to give you the names of some of the guys Auburn brought in Jonathan Eccles from USF. Jake Johnston is who I think is going to end up being the starter here. He was at Texas A&M. He's been at North Carolina. I can't remember where all else. He's a veteran tight end and pretty good too. He was an under the radar addition, but I think he could end up being a really big piece for Auburn's offense this season. Auburn also added Arliss Boardingham, who's transferred around a little bit but has a lot of talent. And then Xavier Newsome from Howard, probably more of a developmental guy there. But this room, suffice to say, has been upgraded and has been completely revamped. So I'm watching to see how that depth chart shakes out. Again, you got a mix of some more receiving versus blocking, but Alex Golesh is going to ask his tight ends to be able to do both. Going to the defensive side of the ball now, the defensive line. Do the young guys step up? That's my first question I'm looking at along the defensive line. Meaning Malik Altry, Jordan Crawford, and Darion Smith, 3 of the guys that Auburn was able to retain from last year's defensive line. They all played, and they played important roles last season. But do they make another step? Do they continue to get better in their development? If they do, that's going to be really big. If they don't, Auburn's going to be in trouble along the defensive line. So how do they develop? What improvements are they making this spring? Auburn did get back Dallas Walker along the defensive line, as I mentioned earlier, really big that he got another year of eligibility. He provides a veteran presence, but nonetheless, Auburn needs those younger guys to step up and continue to improve. And then what impact will the transfers make? You added a couple really highly thought of transfers in Cody Sigler from Arkansas State and then Walter Mathis Jr. from LSU. Those 2 guys are going to be important pieces, potentially 2 starters for you along the defensive line. You need to be hearing in spring that those 2 guys are what Auburn thought they were going to be. Very important pieces this year for Auburn. And then finally, St. Barrier, I believe is how you pronounce it. Another transfer, a true nose tackle for Auburn is someone else to watch along the defensive line. But this is offensive line, defensive line, the trenches. That's what's going to have my biggest attention this spring. Staying along those lines, the edge, like defensive end position, we know Auburn lost a lot here. Lost Keldrick Falk. You lost Keyron Crawford. 2 really good players for you. I don't think this room on paper is near as good as it was last year. And it probably won't produce the level it did last year. But coming out of spring, you need to be hearing that, hey, we hit on the additions of Deshaun Womack from Ole Miss, the transfer defensive end / edge. We hit on the addition of Nate Johnson from Missouri. Those 2 guys Auburn really needs to pan out. And then along with that, you want to hear that Jared Smith is taking another step forward, that J.J. Falk and Joe Phillips are taking another step forward. Those three guys were massive high school recruits that Auburn got during the Hugh Freeze era and was able to retain. Auburn's counting on those guys to develop and take another step this year to be productive and to be a part of the defensive end and edge room rotation. So again, along with defensive line, offensive line, those are rooms I'm really watching. And then lastly, for positions, backup quarterback. We, of course, know that Byron Brown is going to be the starting quarterback. There's no competition there. Who wins this backup quarterback position between Tristan Tia, a transfer from Oregon State who played a couple games there last season, and then Lachlan Hewitt, who transferred from USF. Those two guys are going to battle it out for the backup quarterback position. My guess going into spring is Tristan Tia will end up winning that job. I think Auburn, the staff, is really high on him and his potential. I believe he'll be a redshirt freshman. But he's going to have to win the job, and Lachlan Hewitt's going to have a little bit of an advantage, knowing the systems that he was at USF last season. So I'm looking forward to watching those two guys battle it out. There's a good chance that one of those guys is the quarterback next season for Auburn. As I mentioned, going to have a lot more on the position rooms, position groups, as we continue on this spring. Just wanted to go ahead and give a little bit of an overview of things to watch out for, position battles to watch out for as Auburn enters spring practice. So what are my biggest concerns entering spring? I know everybody wants to stay positive, but let's get into concerns. As I've already mentioned, the line of scrimmage, that's number one. It's always going to be. If you're going to win in this league, in the SEC, if you're going to be able to compete for championships, you have to be really good up front. You have to be able to move people on both sides of the football. Is Auburn going to have enough talent to do that? And even for Auburn's defensive line, that has overachieved, in my opinion. Last year, I thought they majorly overachieved. Because Auburn's linebackers are so good, Auburn's defensive line just needs to be able to eat up blocks. What do I mean by eat up blocks? Meaning, I'm able to do enough to where the offensive line can't get to the second level, to the linebackers, and it allows guys like Xavier Atkins and Elijah Melendez and DeMarcus Riddick to go and make plays. So you don't have to be great. You don't have to make the play yourself, but you free up your linebackers to go make plays. I thought Auburn's defensive line did a tremendous job of that last season. It's why guys like Bobby James and Travis, for instance, who didn't necessarily eat up the stat sheet, was a really good player for Auburn because he did those things. He made winning plays, as some people would call them. So Auburn's defensive line just needs to be able to do that. Offensive line-wise, Auburn has to be better in all facets. Auburn's offensive line last year was not terrible run blocking. They were atrocious in pass protection. Now, in Alex Golish's offense, I think the tempo and how quickly Byron Brown gets the ball out usually will help with some of that. But nonetheless, Auburn needs to improve along the line of scrimmage, and we've been saying this since 2017. Auburn has to be better here. And when you add talent from the Big Ten or from the Group of Five level, there is concern about how that's going to translate to the SEC, particularly along the line of scrimmage. Are these guys physical enough? Are they strong enough? Those are questions that we won't necessarily be able to answer in spring, but it is something that we can watch for. And the quality depth, that's the second thing I've got listed here. It's just tough in the transfer portal era, in the NIL era, to build quality depth. There's not going to be a single team in the country, maybe except for Texas, Ohio State, maybe, that's going to look at you and say, yeah, we've got the level of depth that we would like to have. It's just not possible now because everybody has money and everyone can spend it. So nobody wants to go be a backup somewhere where they can go make starter money and play as a starter elsewhere. So it's hard to build quality depth and retain guys. And it's even tougher in year one where you're having to bring in so many transfers and you're just having to fill out a roster. So that is a concern for me. So Auburn needs to maintain health the best they can. Some things are out of your control. But I don't think Auburn can afford any major injuries here. I don't think the depth is where you would like it to be. That's not necessarily Alex's Golish's fault. Again, this is year one. You hope that can get better as you progress into further seasons down the road. But that is an area of concern. And then finally, the USF to SEC transition. So we know Auburn took double-digit USF transfers, and Auburn's going to count on those guys. Again, this is beyond Byron Brown. You brought in essentially the whole USF wide receiver room. You brought in a couple of defenders from USF. You brought in a running back. You brought in multiple offensive linemen. Now, these guys have shown the ability to play with some of the most talented and strongest and toughest dudes in the country. USF beat Florida last year. USF played against Miami. USF the last couple years have played tight games with Alabama. So they've shown the ability in a game or two to be able to do it, but can you sustain that? Can you play at that level for a 9-game now SEC slate? And are these guys good enough? Obviously, Alex Golesh believes they are, or he wouldn't have brought them, and he didn't bring everyone from USF, so he knew the guys that he thought was capable of playing at this level and guys that he didn't think were capable of playing at this level. But it doesn't mean he couldn't be wrong on some of them. It's still a transition. So it's something to keep an eye on this spring. And again, some of these questions we're not going to have an answer to this spring. That's okay. But these are just things to keep in mind that as we progress throughout spring practice and into the fall camp and into the season, some things that are concerns for me that I'm thinking about as we roll on here. But man, I'm just so excited. I'm so excited for spring practice to be here and looking forward to watching this team get out on the field. It's always exciting when there's a new era and there's a new regime. Auburn has had that too often, as we know, over the last several years. Hopefully, if everything goes to plan for Alex Golesh, Auburn won't have to deal with this again for a while. But everything new is always exciting. So looking forward to seeing this team out there and on the practice field on Tuesday, A-Day again in April. Looking forward to that. We'll have plenty more on this team and how spring practice is going. Each week on the show, hopefully we'll be able to break down some things that occurred the previous week, along with going deeper into the position rooms and kind of breaking down the depth chart a little bit more as we get a better idea of things. But thank you so much to watching or listening to this spring preview. I really appreciate it. If you have not already, I'd ask you to please like and subscribe to the show. Again, thank you so much. And just a side note again, if you're looking for Auburn basketball content, if it's not out there already, it will be soon, just in a separate episode. So just be on the lookout for that. But that will wrap us up for today's episode of Talkin' Tumors. I'm Carson Horn. Thank you for listening to Talkin' Tumors. If you liked what you heard, make sure to subscribe and follow @Talkin' Tumors on social media so you'll never miss an episode. War Eagle.